And welcome back to Edric Poon and Company, the podcast where anybody can inspire everybody. Now, thanks again for joining us for this episode of the podcast. Now, in the world of podcasting, right, there's so many different types of podcasts. But one of the fundamental things that I think about podcasters is that we have this insatiable curiosity, be it in a topic, be it in a niche. But in the case of my guest, it's really about people and leadership. So that being said, she's so curious about people and this topic of leadership that she eventually turned it into a business. 20 years of marketing and eventually going into consulting. And now she runs her own podcast as well called the Rebel Curiosities podcast. So in this episode, we are going to be asking the question, should leaders be more curious? Well, hopefully we're going to get an answer with Pearl. Hi, Pearl.
Hey, Edric. Thanks for having me. That's an awesome introduction, by the way.
Okay,
Thank you.
You can use that for your events next time if you like. So that being said, right, first of all, congratulations on starting your podcast this year.
Thank you.
Okay, and it's going to be one heck of a road with the amount of learning that comes in. Now, I'd like to ask you, right, what led you to starting this whole thing of having a curiosity podcast? I mean, is it because you like asking questions? How does it work?
Well, that's a big part of it. But, starting a podcast was never the first big intent. When I started looking at curiosity as something that I want to find out more and learn, I wanted to talk to people about it. There's only so many books and so many content that you can consume by yourself. And I think conversations are another level to bring it to, more understanding of it. So I thought, what's the best way to have conversations about that? And the idea of podcast then came up. And, I think it was certainly a step into, or maybe outside my comfort zone in doing that, because that's something I've never considered before, but it felt like the right thing to do at that time.
Oh, fantastic. Now let's go straight into the question, shall we? Which is business, leadership, and curiosity. I really wanted to hear from you about what you found the link to be.
When we look at businesses and you look at it, through the past generations and the period that we're operating in, it has always got a lot of challenges. And if you're in business, the things that you have to ride through. And just having right through, the recent pandemic, we are facing a new set of challenges. And what that means is, as leaders, you need to have the ability to pivot quickly. You need to adapt quickly to the changes, right? When the environment around you changes, you need to think about your strategies. A lot of times there is that saying, what got you here won't get you there. And I think it's that mindset that leaders operate in these days. Now, without curiosity, without that openness to thinking a different point of view, to exploring options, it would be extremely difficult for you to have the agility to pivot quickly. And I think that's why, when we look at leaders these days and you look at the material and the content that talks about leadership, agility comes up a fair bit. So whether it's change agility or strategic agility, that comes up as top topics.
You're bringing up very, very interesting points whereby, especially what got you here isn't going to get you there, and we keep changing. That being said, for yours, this is such a good throwback or a segue to your own life. 20 years in marketing. Across pharma, you were in aesthetics, if I'm not wrong.
Yeah.
And 20 years of marketing, and all of a sudden now you're running your own running your own business, running your own podcast. Like, where did you see that you needed to pivot?
I really like to have a good story about this. It was an aha moment where I decided to do all this and embark on a new journey. But
I smell a butt coming.
The fact of the matter is a lot of changes, especially transformational changes, start small, and I think all of us, we would have seeds of ideas or sparks of creativity along the way in our journey, which makes us think what if, and why not, And then that brings us to where we are. I think having done 20 years of marketing in the corporate world, it was the option of looking at it and going, well, I could do another 5-10 years of this, operating in the way I think and the way I do now. Or I could deviate a little and explore a different path. And I know that, by deviating and doing something different would completely take me away from my comfort zone. And there would be so much to learn in that space. And I looked forward to that instead. So it was kind of a moment where you thought, like, looking at where I am right now, is that a path that I want to take on and learn and explore? And to me, that's curiosity, right? Because curiosity is the spirit of exploring. And then that's when I decided, okay, like if not now, then when?
And do you find that it took you a while to actually kind of identify or acknowledge that you had this curiosity? And is that kind of your mission in life now?
Yeah, mission is such a big word. I often like to think of mission as the question of why do you do what you do? I think that's just it, right? And curiosity has always been part of us, and I say us because it's just human nature to be curious. It's just that along the way, like how we grow up, the education system will like kick it out of us. And then if it's not completely dead, the corporate system will make sure it's completely taken out of us. And it's not a bad thing. I mean, a lot of times, in the world that we operate, there's a focus on efficiency and processes to make things, reasonable, understandable. And that's what it is. But in doing so, sometimes the trait of curiosity gets killed off. So I guess coming back to your question, have I always been curious? I think I've always been on the fence of like, what if and why not?
What if and why not? That sounds like a very good framework for pretty much everything,
Yeah.
right? If I go to the supermarket and this thing's on sale, what if? Why not?
For example, like, if you were looking at music for the first time, right? And you were looking at a band, right? And you suddenly thought, oh, it would be cool if I could play like that. And then, the next thing that usually you say to yourself, but I could never. But what if you have the question, what if you could learn?
Yeah, you're totally picking up the guitar right now.
I am. I'm trying to, yes.
It's still, I have a friend who stopped playing the guitar for many years, signed up for music school.
Yeah.
Right. And he's been playing every week and he posts videos of himself. I'm like,
Impressive.
He's really good now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Impressive.
So you're gonna get there for sure.
Yeah, I hope so.
Absolutely. I mean, you're living what you're preaching. That's what I think. Right. And do you find that challenging yourself in this way, right, is also another way of really trying to get comfortable with being uncomfortable?
Oh, yes. You touch a really good point. When we talk about curiosity, oftentimes, we think of questions that would change or rethink the status quo. And, in a lot of like the interviews and the conversations that I have, the status quo tend to be outside, like, or the world or, the way we work or live or study. But a lot of times when you think about curiosity and trying to change the status quo, it'll be your inner status quo that you're trying to change. And to that point, what you have to then address and look into is actually inwards.
Okay, I think I need to get a couch and lie down. And you're gonna ask me questions about what's your relationship with your father like? Tell me more about your mother.
I wouldn't be at that stage yet, but I'll be curious. Yes, if you want to tell me.
Yeah, well, I was just having a guest earlier on about, one of the previous episodes, right, about neuroplasticity, right, and organizational psychology.
Yeah.
So it was really interesting to hear. It was really the topic of empathy that we were talking about earlier, and it can be taught.
Yeah.
And it's just about creating the right habits, understanding when you get demotivated, how you get demotivated, and disassociating yourself from certain situations, right? Like whether it's conflict, and conflict can be external and internal. So it's so interesting to be able to create a certain level of cognizance of these things, right? And all this, you're probably thinking, hey, Edric, stop waffling, get to the point, right? So I'm just trying to make it a point that to be back to the topic of that curiosity, one has to be cognizant of curiosity in the first place to take the effort, even though it may seem obvious or even borderline stupid to ask why. But if you don't ask, you won't know.
Exactly.
In your work, right, being a consultant with the Curious
Leaders Circle.
Curious Leader Circle. what are the things that seem so obvious but yet aren't?
Yeah. So I do want to pick up on your point about being cognizant because that's a big thing, you know. I was talking to, a senior leader in healthcare recently, and we were talking about emotions because to be good at what you do, so whether it's in leadership or whether it's working with others, you need to recognize what you're feeling and what emotions it is. And just so that, the society that we are in today, sometimes it's not easy for the men to be able to recognize that,
Oh my God, the whole men shouldn't cry, boys shouldn't cry thing. Is that where we're going?
Yes. And, I stand on the fence like, why should we have this differentiation, right? Recognizing emotions. So this person I was talking to actually brought up the book by Brene Brown, which was the Atlas of the Heart. I think that's what it's
new
called.
one, right?
Yeah. And it has identified 87 emotions that we feel.
Are you going to go through all 87 of them?
I won't, but it was interesting to look at it and then realize that there's actually some things that you can articulate, to describe what you're doing. So if you're feeling down, like you're just feeling negative, what is it? Are you being upset? Are you angry? Are you disappointed? And it just gives you the vocabulary to express.
Okay.
So back to your point about, cognizant, like it's just about the awareness and recognizing what it is. And then curiosity can take it to another level. Because if you're not even aware in the first place, you wouldn't know how to use it effectively. So in the business that I'm in, and we talk a lot about curiosity at work and in leadership, it comes down to empathy as well, as you said, in leadership, in understanding how your team feels or how your team member, works, that there needs to be a level of curiosity and care. And this was mentioned in one of the interviews I did as well. Like the Latin word for curiosity, like at the heart of it, stems from the word care. So you have to care to be curious. And that's why it boils down to also, looking at how we lead in that space.
That's really interesting. Curiosity stems from care. Yeah, because technically if you didn't care, you wouldn't ask or want to know more.
Yeah.
Right? Would that be safe to say?
Yes, I think so. And, if you're curious about the subject, you care to want to know more.
That's really interesting. And circling back to the question about what may have seemed so obvious. I mean, there has to be one of the clients. I mean, you don't have to name who, but it's one of those like, you mean you didn't know that kind of situations? But would you be at liberty to share one of those things?
Well, let me put it this way. I think for a lot of leaders, there is immense stress. So, whether you're running your own business or, you're part of an organization, there's just so much stress to perform. And then you have to bring your team along with you. So I think to that point, I don't think people are deliberately getting up each day and saying, I don't want to care about people. I think it's the obstacles and the stress and the pressure that sometimes get in the way. And I think that's where, coaching will help to unpack that. So if you're a leader and, you want to find out like, what is it that holds you back from reaching out to, the team or bringing the team up to the next level, there are ways to talk through that. And sometimes it could be your own success factors, So for example, like if you have someone who's a high performer, who's so used to doing everything and giving you the right answers, and then now leading a team, right? The instinct for this person would be to give you the answer every time. So again, like, when you talk about empathetic leadership, about being curious and being able to pivot and be flexible in strategic agility, all of these things that got you here where you're good at, it's not going to serve you. So you have to let go of things that don't serve you anymore.
Wow, that's a new level whereby you can actually so-called let go of what you thought was right.
Yes.
And you have to relearn everything. Well, not everything, but I don't think that we have to unlearn per se, but we really layer on more information to finesse what we're trying to do and what we're trying to achieve.
Yeah. And I think unlearn might be the right word.
Really?
Yeah. So, coming onto this journey, I realized that there's a lot of things to learn. Picking up podcasting was one of the hardest things I had to do alongside designing a website. But I think unlearning could be the hardest thing. Like, you could learn new skills and that just piles on, right? Like, you pick up things. unlearning is just so hard. You have to let go of things that served you before. And the hardest thing is when it's part of your own identity.
Right. What's the most painful thing or challenging thing you had to unlearn?
So I never thought of myself as someone needing to have control all the time until I started operating by myself and things changes all the time. You're nodding, so I assume you know what it's like.
Oh, yeah. On my end, it's more like sometimes you assume that everybody has the same business ethos as you,
Yeah.
the business ethic as you, the business process as you. I want this paperwork. I want this time. I want everybody to be on time because it's the
Yeah.
same kind of values that I have, right? And then somebody goes, "Oh, no, it's not that way." You're like, "Whoa, what's going on?" So I have to like fight on the inside just to manage my own emotions and help me to understand that
Correct.
okay, the world isn't like that.
Yeah.
Is that the same for you?
It's a lot of reframing, exactly to how you said it. I think it's a lot of looking at the situation and then turning inwards, turning that curiosity inwards, right? And then thinking, okay, why am I reacting this way? And again, back to the word cognizant, like you need to be aware that that situation is causing you to react this way. And then you separate that emotion from yourself. Okay, I'm feeling this way because of that. And I need to learn how to deal with it.
Right.
So there's that unlearning of, letting go of expectations in this case. Like, you have to like, okay, the way I operated before cannot serve me now. And then you have to change. And I think, if I worked as a marketeer and there's a lot of times where I want to drive projects up. Like, you get like all these campaigns and planning and out, right? And you want to meet the deadlines. But at the same time, like, when you're managing a team, you're no longer in charge of those timelines. It's not about you doing the work. It's about your team. So I also remember that, when I was leading a team, that thing I had to unlearn was, it's not about you, it's about them. So the opportunities that you have to give to your team members is for them to learn, to explore, and be able to solve problems by themselves. And the hardest thing, I think, for a lot of leaders as well is to step back and let that unfold.
Yeah, leadership 101, which is you have to trust your team, right? Equip them well and trust them.
It's beyond, I think it's more than trust. Like you can trust your team, but you can also go on and say, hey, so how is that? Like, is that done? Like, I trust you though. I'm just checking in. I think it's really that internal, state that you were mentioning as well. Like you really got to unlearn that and say that you got to let them explore and make mistakes and then let the work evolve from there. But it's a tension because, as a business, you cannot afford to make many mistakes.
Yep.
Which is why just this morning I was watching this TED Talk about design thinking.
Oh, okay.
And that was interesting as well. You see, the curiosity just goes everywhere, right? So in design thinking, you do a lot of prototyping, ideating, and then it's a circle, you go back and do it again.
Yep.
And I think in business and leadership, that applies as well. Take small risks so that you can fail and learn fast. And then that in itself will create, a stronger team that bring you, to the next level of success.
I want to tap on your marketing brain, right? Because I've been exploring the idea of podcasting as personal branding. That's one thing. I think a lot of C-suites, a lot of leaders right now, what are they missing by not marketing themselves?
Via podcast?
No, not just podcasts,
Really?
but in general, because I realized that, okay, you reach a certain level, right? You get certain high-level jobs by word of mouth, by referrals. That also kind of limits which kind of companies you can go to. But if you really were able to market yourself better, that gives you a lot more opportunity to explore new things, right? So I'm just wondering, do you actually see it within those leaders that, hey, you're kind of missing out on marketing yourself?
There is a missed opportunity of putting your story out there. That is also, like you said, like PR 101 also. Like if you're a PR person trying to promote a company and its services, nobody really wants to cover that. But if you have a personality interview, like the CEO story or the company business story, the history behind that, there's interest in it. And I think one way of looking at that is how you can extend that identity even more and share that story forward.
Right.
I don't think leaders are resistant to that. I think it comes down again to the priorities. If you're trying to make P&L, it's a hard life. Like, you're balancing a lot of operations and issues while bringing the business to the next level. But I think having a podcast format or, any other ways of like communicating your story, it's a way of building your business. And a lot of times, I think it's about getting the right angle and the story in, and then be able to have a conversation in that place. And I think this is the reason why we have podcasts, right? Because we enjoy that to and fro conversations rather than just one way and say, I'll put something out there and hope people read it.
Oh, absolutely. Because the truth is, I mean, if you look at the history of podcasting, right? Why do podcasts exist? It's because people were sick of or weren't able to get what they wanted on radio. So that's why they started doing podcasting. He's like basically saying, if you're not going to do it for me, I'll do it myself.
Yeah.
Right? That's the idea. And I still think that this medium is one of the best things, not for marketing per se. It is a tool that can be used or a vehicle for marketing, but ultimately, right, it's still about the information and how in-depth that this can go. And the beauty of it is in the art. To me, it's in its artistry. You can script it all you want, but I mean, with people like me, look, we're completely going off script right now. I've given you the questions, you've taken a look, and you're like, Edric, why are you not sticking to the plan? What the hell's
I
going
think
on?
I may have brought you off script as well.
No. I love this. This is why it goes organic, right? And the point is that if we're talking about how much deeper podcasting can go, it's allowing it, again, when we talk about that vulnerability, if you're able to let go of those things and just shed the armor, allow yourself to share those stories, people who are listening will follow you down the rabbit hole because it's true, it's honest, and it's very intriguing, right? Even if it were a story about picking up, I don't know, a dirty piece of chicken wing or something like that, I mean, I'll story for another day.
I have to hear that one.
It's one of those old army stories, right? Whereby, you're out training and that's all you got. Yeah, so, but it is, so I digress. As always, as you all know on the podcast, I tend to waffle on too long. When we were planning this podcast, I really had a question about generational differences, right? What are millennials, or at least in the workplace, what were millennials curious about? And how are Gen Zs curious right now? And I just heard from Ying Long, right, from City Music as well. There's this thing called, I think the next generation are called Alphas.
Yes,
is that correct?
The Gen Alpha.
Oh my God, I'm so outdated. So I don't even know what to expect anymore because the questions are going to be different. Their priorities are going to be different.
Oh, yes.
How are you even preparing leaders for things like that?
Every generation would feel like the previous generation don't understand them. And, I think that's kind of like just keeping up with the times. You talk about millennials and Gen Z, right? I'm on the cusp of like millennial, so I can squeeze myself in, or, some people
I think
would
you
just...
and I are the same age.
Okay, we'll put ourselves in Gen X then.
Maybe not.
Maybe not. But, the millennial generation, if we look at us, like we are definitely different from our parents' generation. And that generation is going, I don't know what the hell is this generation up to. And then we look at the next generation, Gen Z, and it's like, wait, we don't understand them. So, look, I have my nephews who's like texting me or like I work with Gen Z who I get texts from. And sometimes I have to Google what those acronyms mean. I don't understand. And everything is shortened, right? Like,
Yeah.
So the previous generation is saying, why don't we like to call them and pick up calls? And in this generation, it's like, why can't you text properly?
Yeah, why? Why is it? Okay, so help me understand this. I mean, you seem to be the bridge over here, right?
I'm not sure about that. I'll try my best.
Why is it that they don't want to take calls? Is it inefficient?
For the millennials?
Well, I think for the Gen Zs
Gen
don't want
Zs?
calls, yeah.
Yeah, well, I'm not sure. Like, I think calls, like even I think in our generation, we no longer do calls as much as we just send a quick text and,
It's true.
WhatsApp, right? And oftentimes, when we do have conversations, we would meet up, right? But we no longer do calls anymore. And I don't know whether it's like having our digital, like, our phones and all that caused that. And then you have the new generation where everything can be settled online, where their identities exist, and everything is so efficient. You don't even have to spell out the whole word, or the whole sentence. It's acronyms. And I guess where I'm coming from is every generation would be different in that sense. When I look at Gen Z, I sense that this group of people, which is currently 10 to 24, I think, they they are seeking for more meaning and purpose in what they do. So, if we have, let's say, the Gen X or the Boomers generation, they will go, why do you need to ask so many questions about why you need meaning to do what you do? Here's the work, go do it, right? Because that's how they worked. But to be honest, if I look at people who are in their 60s and 70s right now, that's the same question on their mind. Like, what is my purpose here? What is there any meaning in what I do? The questions don't change, but the way we went about it was different, right? So I think it comes to a phase in life where we are probably able to have asked that question. And I think the Gen Z generation reached there before us.
It's very interesting. The thing is, now we look at it as an organization, right? If, let's say, for example, again, we have the more senior leaders, okay? By senior, I mean old, okay? Now,
You had to clarify that,
I have to.
just in case there was any misunderstanding.
Yes, no misunderstandings. If you're old, you're old. Okay, that's it. Now, that being said, it's very difficult to, number one, pick up on these things. Number two, it's what do you think are the kind of questions that they should be asking to understand the workforce? Because it's the leader who has to adapt. It's not the workforce that's going to change for that one person. That's the truth, right? So what do you think is the right question to kickstart that conversation?
I would love to see like the leader changing for the people actually, because sometimes in other organizations, you get people trying to change to fit the leader. But I like the scenario that you're painting. As a leader, if you're trying to understand someone who's a different generation from you, I think if, let's say we talk about Gen Z, seek to understand, like be curious about it. Oftentimes, there's kind of like the unspoken thing about respect, right? Like if I ask you to do a piece of project, why are you questioning why we have to do it? Right. And then the feeling that, a leader will get is like, are you doubting me? Or, is this a issue of respect? Like you don't respect my vision for this? And then if you look at it on the other side, that person was just trying to understand, why am I doing this? Like, what can I do to make it meaningful? And, Gen Z are in that stage of life where they're trying to understand and create their own identities as well. And again, questioning doesn't mean like, a challenge or a disrespect or a notion that they don't want to do it. So I think for leaders in communicating with this generation, need to be able to build a sense of the why. You need to communicate more about the reason for doing it and how their strengths match into it, and perhaps the purpose to the company. Now, all of this may not be very big. Let's say if you're just doing a menial task, right? Like, please enter their report, like not so much. But I think you need to have regular conversations with people on the lookout for why they do the work and be able to communicate that vision and that why for them. Because again, these people are also looking out for their own whys,
Right. Yeah, I mean, I'm a big proponent of making sure that I understand what I'm doing, and it has to come with a purpose, right?
Yeah.
I'm not going to do something just because like you told me to. I'm going to ask why, because I'm an all or nothing kind of guy. So if I'm going to do something like, and I believe in it, I'm going to do it well, right? But if you don't tell me a reason and you say, just get it done, and I go through the motion, I'm going to half-ass it. So if that happens, right, then it doesn't look good on you, doesn't look good on me. We're not going to get the right result that we want, which is so strange. And yet, so sometimes to me, it's about the communications of, again, like what you mentioned, communicating that purpose tends to fall flat on its face when they say it very surface level. Like say, for example, okay, we got to do this report because we got to submit it by 3:00.
Yeah, very common.
Yeah, but why do we need to submit it at 3:00? I just don't ask. I need it by 3. It's like, no, because this report goes up and it gives us the whatever bird's eye view of some shit, and that helps us to get better in our sales and all that. And because of that, but you see, that's the thing. Once you have to go into the long story, sometimes we don't have time for that.
Right.
So both parties also have to understand that I'd love to tell you, just help me with this right now. I'll get back to you on that when we have a bit more time, but there's urgent. So do me a solid, help me out here. So the younger one, on the other hand, then needs to go, all right, I'll do it. Yeah, right. And then finally, when it's time to get the answer, be excited about it, for goodness sake. Somebody got back to you. Like, don't be, don't be ungrateful for the idea that somebody came back to you, but it took a while, because apparently, okay, this I'm belaboring the point because my son sometimes
He's Gen Z.
oh yeah, he's 12. So he's like, I gotta wait an hour. I'm like, dude, an hour is nothing.
There you go.
An hour is nothing.
It's
What
just
do
a different understanding on definition of
and
time.
it's like all of a sudden, what your time runs faster than mine,
Yeah.
or my time isn't the same as yours. Like,
Yeah.
what planet do you live on? I don't get it, but that's the idea, right? Like, so that actually now, great. This is why I do podcasts, because I get to reflect on my own problems, and with other people, they get to be my sounding board, and I get to learn something new. Thanks, guys.
I need to charge you for this. Like, you know.
I'm gonna have to lie down again.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
We'll talk about this later.
Yeah. I wanna go into a little bit more about your, how would I say, your business journey.
Mm-hmm.
I tap on your knowledge as a business owner, so I get to learn from you as well. And since we're on the question of why did you start this?
You know, I think you've been longer on this journey, so I would have things to learn from you, but I'll share about my journey.
Oh, please do.
So, like 20 years in marketing, right? That's such a neat statement to kind of put everything together. But even then, like, you know, across this journey, I started out as a writer at first for a lifestyle magazine. So in my, you know, late teens, like that was my first job. Okay, forget that supermarket job. But, you know, like the first proper job I had was a writer.
Stop right there. Sorry, supermarket job. Go.
Yeah.
What was that?
Well, we have like different jobs like across our lives, right? My very first job, like, was a cashier at the supermarket.
It's not bad.
It's not bad. It was really fun. Like, you know, I love cashiering. I love bagging groceries, restocking shelves. And it was the question of why. Like, everybody had to separate out, you know, like your detergent from your, you know, whatever else you were buying. I would just put them all together. And, you know, everyone would be really upset by that. And I would be like, why not? It's quite, you know, economical. Like,
well, you didn't charge 5 cents back then. Now
back
you
then
do.
we didn't charge 5 cents. That is true. Now, you see, now they would appreciate my approach.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. But it's just, man, when the last time somebody did that, they mashed up my eggs. I got so upset.
Oh, you got to carry the eggs differently.
Yes, true. Anyway, so after a supermarket job, then you started writing.
Then I started writing.
Because you have a diploma in mass communications.
I do. You have done your homework.
Of course I do.
Yeah.
Yes.
But I've always enjoyed writing, you know, and I think writing was also kind of like a way to clarify the world that was going around me and be able to articulate it more clearly. So it was a fun thing to do then because I get to interview people. That started early. But then after doing it for 2 years, you know, I realized that, as a writer, you just capture things. You're not really making anything happen. So then I went, you know, over to the dark side, which is marketing and PR. And I often joke about it. Like, I spent half my life in marketing and I still call it the dark side.
But you didn't do spin doctoring. Spin doctoring was where the money was back in the day.
I should have.
Oh, yeah. I would have done a similar thing.
Yeah.
But anyway, yes,
Yeah.
this is your story. Please carry on.
And marketing was like, you know, 20 years, like you said. But at every turn, like there was different things that I did. You know, I joined different companies. I picked up different products. And with every different portfolio that you take on, you learn something new. Because marketing is not about, you know, the fancy promotions and the campaigns that you do. It's really about understanding what people want and then how to serve, you know, what you have as a solution to that. So you got to, you know, think about things differently. And that was kind of like the intellectual fun or, you know, roller coaster that you get to enjoy about the work. So coming back to, you know, where we are now, I guess it was that fork in the road where I was doing that for 20 years and then I could do it for another 5 and 10 more years. And I was just thinking like, well, what if, that question again, what if?
Did you wake up one morning and just, really, because for me, it was, I literally just woke up one morning. In fact, it wasn't a morning. It was one of those 2:30 a.m. thoughts, right? Hey, I could do this.
Really?
Yeah, it just really happened.
That
right?
was a lightning strike aha moment for you.
Yeah, it took a gestation/fermentation process for about 2 years, and it finally happened, right? So, okay, took that. So I'm always trying to draw parallels with other people's stories to see whether or not is there something here that is common.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, we're human, right? Our brains are wired to find patterns.
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering, as a business owner, when you first started, in fact, we're still on this journey right now, what were the things that you kind of took away from your years of marketing and trying to apply it into your startup? And you're like, No, it's not happening right now.
I can tell you one stark difference. I mean, it's the resources, isn't it?
Oh my God. Yeah, it's everything, right?
You become from like whatever you were doing before in a job that you specialize in. And then now you're like, yes, you're the boss. You're also like the admin person. You're also like the person who needs to get, your copier paper and your stationery, and you got to like balance your taxes as well. Like it's everything.
Yeah, I haven't reached that point yet of balancing taxes. So that's good. I wish you the best, and I hope that you will be charged GST very soon.
Oh, well, yeah, I think that might be a good problem to have.
That's
Yes.
a good problem. Okay, for you, for those who do not understand this, right? Your company has to hit $1 million in revenue in order for you to qualify to be charged by GST. So,
Yeah.
I suppose that's the government's way of saying congratulations and commiserations on your success.
Yes, exactly. And now we can charge more.
No, we would like to support you with greater works. So please share a little bit of that money so that we can support you in your growth further, right? And pay it forward so that other startups can use grants and stuff like that too.
Exactly. You got that script down.
Yeah. Okay. So let's say, for example, if WSG or whatever it is that needs sponsor, I'm open to sponsorship.
This is really opening up opportunities for you.
So, all the time. Okay. So you have to just kind of get past the shamelessness. I think that's the key to success, to get through shamelessness. Throw in as many plugs as you can and grab every opportunity.
Well, I'll tell you, like being a business owner, I realized the importance of that as well.
Of shamelessness?
Of you will never get if you never ask.
It's true.
Right?
It's true. You cannot be paise already.
No. I mean, well, you can be, but the opportunities won't open up for you if you do.
Yeah, and that's the thing, right? You got to toe the line a lot of the
Yeah.
time, because I've been asking a couple of other business owners this, like, how long did it take for you to reach the point whereby okay, I know my worth, so you're gonna pay me my worth. I think when we first start out, we give out too many discounts just to get the ball rolling, and on a sales perspective, if you think about it, right, it's about creating momentum.
Yeah.
So that's a good thing. But there comes a point whereby you got to go, I really can't do it at this rate, right? Because you're killing me by doing that.
Yeah.
How long do you think it's taken you to reach that point? And I would say you can safely say, this is my value.
Yeah, I think there's two phases to what you're describing. Like, phase one, you're still exploring what's your business value proposition, right? So in that space, you're still creating that value that you bring to the customer. And in that space, it doesn't matter what you charge, because what's important for you is the exposure, the experience, and, like building your own skills in that sense. I think the second part where you talk about like, charging for a value that you bring, it's a lot like marketing. You were asking what I brought before in my experience to this. In marketing as well, like if you're selling another product, another service, and you cannot differentiate or cannot tell people the value that it brings, the next question they're going to ask you is, how much does it cost? Because that's the whole point. Like if there's no value that, you serve, then money is the way that people can peg you to it. But if you can support, let's say, a company, a client on their journey, which, needs to meet their vision, and you're a partner in that sense, it's beyond dollars and cents. And then I think what you're talking about, like being paid like for your value, comes in, because you are a partner. You're not just another seller in that space.
Right. At least you can say that you've had 20 years of experience. I can only go with people and say, I've got 40 years of life. And
4 years of life?
40
years of life.
Yeah.
Right.
4 years of life. Jeez.
So I know. Gosh.
Either I look that young or I haven't lived much.
Well, I'm glad I got it wrong.
Yeah. I want to just kind of circle back that in terms of the curiosity amongst leaders. Like Simon Sinek, right? His book is Leaders Start With Why.
Yeah.
I think probably yours is start with asking why.
Yeah, it could be. Or, like in a very simple way, like why do you do what you do? If you're a leader, and you're responsible for setting the vision and the strategies for your people, you got to stare that one down and think about why you do what you do. And then after that, you think about what type of leader do you want to be? And then that would pave the way for you to open up again, the awareness and the reflection to how you can help people. And, we often say that we do have to be aware of how others are feeling and the way people operate around us. But if we don't understand ourselves, I think that's very hard to relay outwards.
Have you ever considered getting more of these leaders, right? And actually having this session on your podcast instead?
That could be one, yeah. So at Curious Leaders Circle, we actually do events where, it's panel discussions based.
Okay.
So we have one coming up and, we get leaders from different industries and share about their challenges and what it takes to be a successful curious leader. And why curiosity, because that's the name of the game. Why is it so important in leadership?
What are the best answers you've heard so far?
Well, recently there's a lot of talk about how we can be agile, right, in adapting to changes. In the work that I do, I speak a lot with HR leaders as well. And every time I ask a HR leader, what is that trait that you want your leadership to show, right? What's that most important thing that they need to have? It always comes down to agility. But it's not about learning agility in terms of how much they know and could bring to the table. It's how much they don't know and then be able to pivot with that, and then being able to bring people on that journey.
I'd love to continue this conversation with you more about the podcast, especially. You and I got to do another one for the Podcasters Playground.
Sure.
Okay, so if for those who don't know, we've started up a small community of podcasters, right? And it's called the Podcasters Playground. Those who are based in Singapore, I'd love to have you on, hear more of your stories, and let's just get together and have a good time and enjoy what we do, which is podcasting. Okay, and of course, Pearl has been so very... she's member number one. That's the thing. So she's the first mover. She's helped so much in fact, you were the one who motivated me to just get it started. Just
From
by
that
saying,
conversation that we had.
Absolutely. That one time, it's just like, hey, this is a great thing. I'm like, let's do it. Go.
Exactly. I remember you saying that.
Yeah. And that's great. So again, I'm very, very thankful for that. And we have to carry this on another day.
Definitely.
Because if not, your car might get clamped or something like that. So...
We'll have to do it then.
I know it sounds like a very superficial thing, but nobody likes their wheels clamped, okay? But as you know, as we finish up the podcast, there's always a rapid-fire 10-question session. So that being said, Pearl, are you ready?
Of course.
All right, question number one word you like the most.
Curiosity.
Okay.
That's quite obvious.
Okay.
I'll give you another word then. I do like the word authenticity.
Okay.
It's a little bit of a buzzword.
Yeah.
But I think what it means to me is being real. You drop the bullshit in that sense.
2, one word that you really dislike.
That's a really hard one. But I'll tell you one phrase I don't like. That phrase is because it is so, or because it is like that. It signifies you have to accept it, and I just cannot deal with that.
I think to sum that up, maybe the word is arbitrary.
Thank you.
All right, if you could have a conversation with anybody, dead or alive, fictional, non-fictional, who would that be?
Well, we were talking about Metallica earlier, so, I would really like to have a conversation with James Hetfield.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, that's
But
interesting.
on the scientific side, though, recently I've been reading a lot of papers. I'm really ruining your rapid fire round, right?
No.
I want to meet with this psychologist and author Todd Cashiering, who talks a lot about curiosity and his book that's called The Art of Insubordination. So it sounds bad, right? Because it's it sounds a bit rebellious and all, which links to the podcast. But basically what he talks about is why we have to think differently and how do we create a greater good of the community by rethinking some stuff.
Interesting. What do you say to yourself in the mirror every morning?
Every morning?
Yeah.
I need coffee.
That's a very honest answer. I like that. Name one superpower that you'd like to have.
I do like the idea of having super strength. It'll be awesome if I could just lift this table and just move it somewhere else, just because.
I suppose so. Either that or you could pay someone to do it.
That's true.
Or install caster wheels. This thing does have wheels, by the way. It does move.
Oh, if I have to move the car somewhere else, it's easy.
Yeah, well, good point. Yeah. But you got, mom strength, right? You can lift the whole car.
Yeah.
But the problem with that is that you got to have a kid under the car first.
That's true.
If not, it doesn't activate. So it's catch-22. Okay. Favorite food to eat?
Favorite food? I love hearty meals. So if you ask me what's my last meal on earth, I would say a good kick-ass burger and an ice cold beer.
Oh my God. I'm so touched right now.
Why?
because I love that stuff. All right. Favorite travel spot or the next one you want to go to?
Well, favorite travel spot. I had a really good trip around Benelux last year. And, it was just so, looking at Europe as a place and all, like it's different and you get to like be in the arts and the architecture a bit more. So I think that might be a place I go back again.
Lovely. Something in the arts that you've always wanted to do, but yet to do so.
I would really love to be good at like sketching and drawing.
Okay. What does retirement look like to you?
Maybe what it is for me now. Like, I think, we need to change that word from retire to refire, like, do something that excites you and bring meaning and purpose to what you do.
All right. Till the last day.
Till the last day.
Okay. Very cool. How do you want to be remembered? What's your legacy?
That curious rebel who helped inspire and supported other curious rebels in life.
Fantastic. Okay. That's the end of the quick fire round. Now, Pearl, cameras over there. Feel free to just give everybody a shout out and also how they can follow you and your podcast.
Well, so I'm the host of Rebel Curiosities podcast. You can find it on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, everywhere else that you listen to your podcast. I also have a website, www.rebelcuriosities.com. And I'm on LinkedIn as well, Pearl Lim. So feel free to reach out to me and connect with me. Happy to chat as always.
Okay, thank you so much, Pearl. All right, I think we're going to have to wrap this up before your car gets towed. Okay, it's just a joke, okay? Just a joke. She's got appointments because she a busy lady. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see you in the next episode of the Epic Podcast. Bye, everyone.